Hey guys, this is Dan at Readyedge, and I am joining this day. Despite being COVID, we got a lot of students applying to college this year, as usual, and a common question that comes up is how to choose the right college. Um, Today, that's going to be the primary topic, and hopefully you find this useful enough to maybe even share with someone out there, perhaps a friend or family member who might also find this useful, because guys, it's a big decision. You know, you're about to spend 4 years, if not more, at a place, right, that's supposedly going to foster your learning of understanding of the world, not just academically, but also socially. So let's get into it. How does one choose the right college for them? Well, let me start off by saying that it is not the rankings, right? I think, there's a proper way to look at the rankings. The way I would look at the rankings is to treat it like basically about the people, right? It's not about the prestige, it's about the people. So for instance, when you go to a place like San Jose State, right? It's basically very much the case that you'll be surrounded by people who will be coming from the Bay Area, who are very much pragmatists, right? Meaning, in other words, people, let's see, seems like we're experiencing some connection issues here. Well, I hope the connection is strong. We're going to keep going here anyway. So in short, if you go to San Jose State, you're going to be surrounded by the people who are probably from the Bay Area, who are pragmatists and trying to get a degree and get a good job, right? To work probably also in the Bay Area. As a result, it's like, okay, well, if you look up San Jose State in the rankings, it's probably, my guess is, I haven't checked, recently, but my guess is it's probably after the 100s, right? And so generally, though, when you start going lower and lower in terms of rankings, when you go from 70 to 60 to 40 to 30, you start being surrounded by people who are much more driven, right? Naturally, if you go to UC Berkeley, for instance, you're surrounded by people from all over the world, not just in the Bay Area. And you're also surrounded by people who usually are up to greater things. They're probably very ambitious. They're not just looking for a bachelor's degree and getting a job, although I'm sure some of them are. You're surrounded by basically a different kind of person. And so when I think of rankings, I don't think of the prestige, because that's not what it's about. No one's really ever going to care about where you go to, where you got your bachelor's degree, right? It's all going to come down to, do you know your stuff? But in the meantime, why would you go to, say, a higher ranking versus a lower ranking school? It's specifically to surround yourself with people who are more capable than you, meaning they are smarter than you, they're more knowledgeable than you, they have additional perspective that you don't have as of right now. You want to surround yourself with people who are better than you, right? And so if that sounds like you, then sure, you should pay attention to the rankings. But don't just go to a school that's ranked highly just because, you think that it's going to give you some level of prestige or it's going to make your parents that much happier. Because at the end of the day, guys, you're going to be going to school for 4 years, maybe more, right? And you're never going to get those 4 years back, right? These are some of your best years of life. So systematically, though, beyond the rankings, right, we help students think of 3 factors that we think are very, very important, because we think that they dictate how a school feels for those 4 years, right? If you go to some place for 4 years, you better be happy about it. Well, what are those 3 factors? Those are, number 1, major strength and flexibility. Number 2 would be size, and number 3 would be location type. Major strength and flexibility just means, what is the school known for and what is it good at, right? For instance, if you think about a school like UC Davis, they're generally known for biology and they're decently reputed for engineering and computer science, right? You generally don't think of, things like philosophy when you think of UC Davis. You generally also don't think of digital design when you think of UC Davis, right? And so, for instance, if you're a student who's interested in studying biology, it's important to find schools that obviously have a strong program in that, but also have a strong program in another thing that you also might want to learn about, right? Just because you're majoring in biology doesn't mean that's the only course you're going to be taking when you go to college. In fact, it's quite the contrary. You will likely be taking courses in a whole bunch of other things. And by the way, guys, I think the stat is 80% of all students in college change their majors. So why is that so significant is that you should go to a school that fosters all of your academic interests. not just your primary major, right? Because if there's an 80% chance that you're going to change your major anyway, well, ideally you go to a school that has a program that's strong in all of your interests, and hence why the word flexibility is so key, right? There's major strength and flexibility. And so that's the first key factor. And by the way, guys, also important to note that what a school is known for and reputed for, they're probably also putting a lot of their resources and money and hiring quality faculty for those departments anyway. So you want to surround yourself with higher caliber faculty members, of course, as well as, put yourself where the money is. The second factor is size, right? And when I think of size, I'm not talking about physical size or acreage of a university. I'm talking about the undergraduate population size, right? And we generally like to tell students that there are three categories of size. There's small schools, mid-sized schools, and large schools. Small schools are somewhere around 5 or 6K. They're kind of like your Santa Clara University, right? It's not like it's empty, but it's also not like it's buzzy either, right? Mid-sized schools, I mean, the closest one I could really think of that's in our area here in California would be Santa Cruz, right? They have about, I think, 18,000 undergrad students, but generally mid-sized schools are around, 15, right? 10 to 15,000 students. And so, it's big enough where it feels like you're never alone, but it's also not so big where you feel like you're overwhelmed and you're just a fish in an ocean, right? And by the way, generally a feature set of size pertains to what I call social buzz and I would say proactive student support, okay, or student support. So large schools obviously we're talking about the 20,000s, right, 30,000s. You look at crazy numbers like ASU, they have like student enrollment of something like 70 or 80,000, right? Don't believe that, by the way. All that means is that they have a bunch of online students, right, and they're just kind of counting it to inflate their number. But point is, like, large schools like what? UC Berkeley, UCLA, right, very common examples. UT Austin, obviously ASU, right, these are very large schools in terms of population. So what makes it different then, right? What is the difference between a small school and a large school? Well, let's start with the two little things about social buzz and student support. When you go to a small school, right, who is that designed for? If you like basically to really get to know your faculty members, if you like that kind of intimate learning setting where you have about only 8 to 10 classmates per class, and you can really, really dive into the discipline deeply, right? And you can form deeper learning relationships with each person that you're surrounded by, right? That is very much what you'll get at a small school. But it comes at a cost, right? You won't have what I call social buzz. There's not these parties that are going on all the time. There's not a whole lot of club activity just because there's only so many students on campus, right? And secondly is the student support is different for a small school versus a large school. Generally speaking, you'll find that student support at, say, a place like Claremont McKenna or Santa Clara University is much greater per capita than, say, a large school, right? Oftentimes you hear horror stories of, oh, if you go to, say, UC Berkeley, you're just one in many. And, if you need some resources like a job or, employment opportunities or even like classes, it's elbow to elbow. By the way, guys, it's not true. It's just that at a small school, they're actually going to come and help you proactively with those kinds of things. Whereas at a large school, you actually have to go get it. So which brings me to a good segue into large schools. What are they like? Well, large schools, they're not proactive with their student support, right? Small schools are. Large schools are much more reactive, meaning that they wait for you to come to them to ask for help, or if you need something, they'll definitely give it to you. But I think the major misunderstanding here is that, large schools, they don't have resources because it's so competitive and there's so many students, and that's just not true. I myself went to UC Berkeley, and the truth is that you just have to take initiative to go get those resources, right? So from that standpoint, if you are a go-getter, if you like to take initiative and you're not afraid of that, then I think going to a large school is a good fit for you, right, in that way. But if you prefer to be kind of like, I guess you can say supported proactively, right, and constantly, then I would say a smaller school is a better fit for you, which brings me to the compromise, right? Mid-sized schools, schools basically with undergraduate populations between, say, 10 to 15,000 students, roughly, like an LMU, right, is a good example of a mid-sized school that is relatively popular in California. If you're looking for the best of both worlds, right, you want the social buzz, but you also want the kind of the intimacy and the close-knit learning relationships as from a small school. You can get that at a mid-sized school, right? So basically, if you can't make up your mind or you're not sure or you like everything, mid-sized schools are a good fit for you. And generally speaking, that comes in the form of private universities, right? Which brings me to, I think, point number 3 today, right? So far we've covered, basically major strength and flexibility. We've covered, obviously, size in terms of undergraduate population enrollment. Lastly is location type, right? So location type is urban, suburban, or rural. I don't really need to explain this too much, but what I will say is that when you start combining these 3 factors together, you have a very unique kind of school, right? So for instance, if let's say your preference is to go to a large school, either suburban or urban, that is good at biology and business, right? It's really, really useful now to kind of, it allows you to kind of sift, wind down, say, a list of 50 schools now down to, say, only maybe 15, right? And today, that's the problem, is a lot of parents and students ask me, hey, what school is good at this? And the problem is there are too many schools that are good at anything, right? It's all about trying to find the right fit school, right? So that's the key word here, guys, is the right school is the one that fits you best. And I also want to warn the parents out there not to worry too much about the price tag when you're thinking about applying, because a lot of schools, they might report their retail price tag, but they might end up reducing the price for you, right? And so just because a school is listed at, say, $60,000 a year doesn't mean that it's actually going to end up to be $60,000 for your student. In fact, the only way to really find out what they're going to come back with in terms of financial offers is to actually apply to the school, right? So don't just, scratch out a school because you think it's too expensive. You don't want to close your own doors, right? You want to keep as many doors open for your student as possible. And so this brings me to this really cool perspective, and I'll end it on this. If I were to summarize in short how to choose the right school, it's to identify what I call the ILE, or the Ideal Learning Environment. An ILE is somewhat abstract in that every student has these, what I call, ideal factors for learning, right? And what I do with a lot of my students is I ask them, hey, I want you to think back to all of the funnest, most enjoyable moments of learning that you ever had in your life. And that, by the way, that includes both at school but also outside of class, right? Just any kind of moment of learning that really inspired you. And then as I have them kind of, think about that, I ask them then to kind of identify, well, why were those learning experiences so inspiring, right? What factors made those learning experiences so good? And one that I like to, call out for instance, for myself is basketball. Although it's not a academic subject, I really thrived in learning, right, when I used to play basketball. Why? And if I were to break the factors down, it's because, well, I liked working together with other people, right? I also liked the challenge, right? Basketball poses an infinite number of challenges. And lastly, I had some really good teachers, right? Mentors along the way that showed me not only how to play basketball, but taught me things about life. And so if I were to kind of summarize my ideal learning environment from just those factors, right? Ideally, I go to a college that has those same similar factors, right? Good teachers and mentors, right? Teachers who aren't just researchers and just walk away after class is over. By the way, you find a lot of that at UC Berkeley. So just because Berkeley's ranked well doesn't mean that it has good teachers, guys, all right? Just because you're a Nobel winner in physics doesn't mean you're good at teaching physics, right? So for me, it's like, okay, going to a good school for me, the right school for me would be one that has good teachers, one that I get to work together with other people frequently, and perhaps the last part would be that it's a challenge, right? And so, just using basketball alone as a learning experience, right, you can already start seeing why UC Berkeley was very much a good fit for me, right? And that's ultimately why I chose Berkeley out of all the other options I had in front of me. And so, in short, a really easy exercise that's kind of fun is, imagine, I want, if you're a student or you're a parent of a student, basically just, think about what exactly is your ideal learning environment, right? What are the most interesting and exciting learning experiences you've ever had, right? Whether that's learning how to change oil for the first time in your car, right, and using your hands, or whether that's perhaps, Socratic seminars and debating people, right, because you love to argue with people, right? Whatever those little factors are, right, ideally your college environment mimics those factors almost one-to-one. And you might not believe me, but I've been mentoring students for the past 10 years, and I found without exception that students ultimately, when they tell me their factors, right, for what an ideal learning environment is, there are always some really, really good fitting colleges, right? So, in short, I highly recommend thinking about three factors when looking at a college fit for a student. And that is number one, what is the school good at, right? Both is in terms of the major I'm interested in applying for, but also in the categories that are not just my major. Just because in case I decide to switch or double major or major minor, I can do that freely with a department that's strong. The second one is how big of a school do I want this to be, right? How many people do I want to be surrounded by? Do I prefer an intimate learning setting, or do I prefer one that's a little bit more independent, right? And that really depends on who you are as a student. And then lastly is, the location, like where am I, right? Is it important for me to be in the middle of a city because maybe you like the social experiences that come with being in a city? Or do you kind of not mind? Are you open to any of them, right? And I guess in summary, if I were to kind of give you a non-systematic way of thinking about the right college for you, it's what I call the ideal learning environment, right? The ILE. Everyone has an ILE, and let me give you a couple examples. For instance, with engineers, right? Specifically with mechanical engineers, I've learned that their ideal learning environment oftentimes includes hands-on learning, right? And for this reason, by the way, I had a student who got into Carnegie Mellon, UC Berkeley, whole bunch of really reputable schools in engineering that were higher ranked than the school he eventually ended up going to, which was Cal Poly SLO. Now you might be wondering why he chose SLO over, say, the likes of a Carnegie Mellon or UC Berkeley. And it's because SLO's way of educating their students is incredibly hands-on. Their motto is learn by doing, right? So when you're sitting in a physics class, for instance, your teacher might spend 15 minutes talking about the concept and immediately bring the whole class to the lab to start seeing how that concept actually works in real life, right? His ideal learning environment was all about hands-on learning, right? And so the schools that he really, really wanted to go to value that, right? Now, he applied to schools that also weren't all that about hands-on either, but at the end of the day, he chose the one that was the most hands-on for him, right? And so for him, that was his ILE, right? For another ILE, I've heard many students, they just love to debate. We have some of the nation's top debaters, right? And so typically I found that those students would prefer a place where they can openly speak their mind, where they can challenge other people and also be challenged themselves, right, from others. In which case now we're looking at schools like UChicago, right? Now we're looking at schools like perhaps a USC, maybe a UC Berkeley, right? Where basically open discourse and disagreeing is very much encouraged, right? And so, you have to kind of look at the fit, because at the end of the day, guys, you're not going to remember what your ranking was. No one's going to ask you for your GPA or what elective coursework you took your third year, right? At the end of the day, what the right fitting college for you is the one that ultimately will help you thrive, right, at your best in your way, right? So think carefully about what your ILE is. What is your ideal learning environment? And if you're a student, you should find the college that most closely resembles that. And if you're ever curious about how to learn, right, which colleges are known for what, feel free to reach out to me. Shoot me an email, dan@readyedgego.com, and I'd love to fill you in on what colleges might be best fit for you. We do that for all of our existing students already, but hey, if you have a friend who might, benefit from finding their ILE or, customized college list, we can definitely do that for you guys. So I hope you guys found this useful. And if I were to kind of summarize it in one word, it's all about the people, right? The people that you're surrounded by will make or break any experience you have. That was true for me when I was at Berkeley. That was true for me when I worked at Google on Wall Street. And certainly true for me right now at Readyedgego. Surround yourself with the kind of people you think can really help you grow and thrive. It's not just about going to the highest ranking school, trust me, because no one cares. At the end of the day, the only thing that's going to matter is how satisfied with the learning experience were you, and it has nothing to do with the numeric ranking that US News pumped out for the sake of profitability. So anyway, I'll see you guys later. If you like this video, feel free to just, subscribe, and, have your friends also subscribe. We'll be producing more good content as it goes. All right, guys, see you later. Enjoy the rest of your day.